Ron, I've heard you compliment us. The truth of the matter is we've got some folks who are working behind the scenes left and right to make everything work. And so wanted to make sure that we all acknowledge Haley Rupp as the COVID manager and project manager as she's navigated literally all of our campuses and all of our structures to help us be successful. The second one is Erin Carroll. She is below on the screen. She is our executive director for marketing communication in the Division of Student Affairs. If you'll take a look at her screen, you'll also see Wash Your Damn Hands. She has been really leading and managing all of the efforts around the Cougs Cancel COVID campaign. And again, these are two, as Erin has also navigated the space of making sure that all of our campuses had appropriate language and had the materials that they needed to be successful. These are, again, two individuals who've worked really hard behind the scenes and have not necessarily, don't stand up and take credit for things. So I think it's important that we acknowledge those. One of the things that I've asked the vice chancellors to do is to present to you all some of the things that we are facing in the fall and some of the questions that we are attempting to answer for our students, faculty, and staff as we return to campus. Primarily around what does it mean after 18 months? And I think you all are going to experience the same thing as you step back into your workplaces. What does it mean after those 18 months that we're also going to demonstrate care and concern for students, recognizing that our staff also need that in the Division of Student Affairs. Many of them have been working 24/7 to make sure that students have the support that networks that they need. So each of the vice chancellors is going to take a topic and talk with you about some of the questions and concerns and issues that we have. Please feel free to ask questions during the presentation. This really is intended to be a dialogue. We only have 5 slides today, so it really is a good time to ask some questions and get some of those answers out, knowing full well that we have 5 physical campuses that are in certain spaces, a global campus, plus a lot of research and extension sites where our students are located that may not have some of the resources that we do on the physical locations. So I'm first going to hand it off to Dominic Thomas, who's going to talk a little bit about testing, vaccinations, and in person. So Angela, do you want to show the second slide?
Great. Well, thank you all. And I'll keep this brief because Mary's outlined a lot of what we have already gone through as a state and some decisions that were difficult, but I think ultimately the right ones. And first is our COVID testing. So there's going to be fewer opportunities and situations where we need to engage in COVID testing. It may be appropriate. I know on our campus, we have some funds set aside in Vancouver for some COVID testing for students in limited situations. We have a partnership with the Vancouver Clinic, but we're going to have fewer and fewer with the mandate coming in for vaccinations where that is an absolute need. In terms of vaccinations, as Mary Jo outlined, we're going to continue with education encouragement this summer. We have some things in place that will require an earlier mandate related for those living on campus. This we're still considering and figuring it out for our staff and faculty, and we'll have that announced and secured soon. But we've had a lot of questions from students about what we're doing for those disadvantaged communities, those medical deserts, as it were, and students that may not have those opportunities. And so continuing to work with them through all of our resources to make sure that no matter where they're at, they have access to vaccination sites and opportunities, as Mary Jo outlined. The complexity around the mandates are that there's people that are going to look at us and say that this isn't a place for them because we're of this requirement. And I've actually had it in the last few days and week on both sides of the issue. There are folks who feel like the exemptions are too broad. And so they feel unsafe because the exemptions are too broad. And then others who say, you're impinging on my freedom. I don't want to go to a school that is treating us like this. So how dare you mandate what I do? And so it's been a lot of education and conversation, talking to students and families about vaccination requirements that already exist, vaccination exemptions that already exist within our state and across the country and matter of fact, across the world. So there's an international component to this with vaccinations and access and things we need to do. So there's some additional support places. So the complexities when we talk about the mandate are not just saying, hey, here's what it is, but it's also that continued education and the tracking and review that when we have someone who's exempted, and this question has come up in every forum and every FAQ, of what happens when or if there's an outbreak of COVID. And so there are spaces and places and protocols in place for when other outbreaks take place for already set K-12 mandates for this. And sometimes it depends on the specific county health officer. There will be requirements to preclude students from or staff or what have you from coming to campus, and we need to work through that. None of that is firm yet, but we're hoping through the education, outreach, and encouragement, we won't get to that point. And that's where our work is right now, is fielding those calls, really connecting students to resources. In terms of safety protocols, we're going to continue with the masking and the distancing. That distance may shrink as we get through the fall, and we're going to continue to engage with our government and local health officials. Um, and we've a lot of questions again that all of us have gotten about, I'm vaccinated, why do I have to wear a mask? And the CDC comes out with things every day of, hey, maybe vaccinated folks don't have to do this or that. Uh, what I tell students and families is, because the CDC puts out something on their website today doesn't mean we're changing a policy by 5 p.m. Right. So there's going to be some time, some conversation, and we may get to that point where we have masking and distancing shifted, but it won't be immediately after the CDC publishes something on their website at noon and then at 1 o'clock we're changing our practice. The attestation is another thing we're considering, and that is something that I expect to sunset very soon, because as we have the exemptions, the vaccinations, we'll get to a different place with the need for that. And then cleaning, going back to the CDC and some of the guidance around cleaning, it's not what people had at first thought in the need. We will maintain a high standard of cleaning and sanitization across all of our campuses. But this is something that students and our visitors and faculty and staff need to be aware of what's going on, what we're doing to take care of them, and it will be and maintain to be a high priority in what it is that we do in preventing further exposure. So with that, I will hand it to the next slide and maybe back to Mary Jo.
We're going to go to Kate McAteer. Kate.
Good morning, everyone. So on the Tri-Cities campus, as you know, we're located in Benton County, and the vaccine hesitancy, I would say, in Benton and Franklin counties is particularly high compared to the state. I was just looking at some numbers this morning in terms of total vaccination. People that are totally vaccinated in Benton County, where the campus is located, is 34%. That drops to 27% for Franklin County, where a lot of our students come from. And then the state is 48%. So as a commuter campus, we've been seeing and hearing the same things that Dominic has been hearing in Vancouver. Faculty pleased with the president's requirements, and some students saying this is not a very Coug-like thing to do. So what we've really been focusing on, even before the requirement was announced, is working with our partners in the community to help people understand more about COVID-19, especially around vaccinations. So the Pacific Northwest National Lab held a 4-week series called Demystifying COVID-19. And it was phenomenal to hear these 4 science experts from different areas talk about it. But I think what was really great, what they did was they brought in representatives from sectors, the business sector, education, performing arts. They brought in these partners to ask questions. And Martin Valadez, I don't know if any of you know him, he is part of the Hispanic Chamber of Commerce, but also a vice president at Heritage University. So I think getting his voice in there and the questions that he was asking on behalf of the Hispanic and Latinx community was critical. But we also know that, not everyone is going to watch that series. So really then thinking, okay, how else can we partner with local organizations to really get the word out and promote vaccinations? And so Rite Aid approached us about holding a vaccination clinic on campus. And we did that in the month of April. We held, 3 weeks apart, so people could get their second vaccination. And we vaccinated about 1,000 people. And this actually, as well as being, for the public good and promoting public health, it actually brought the campus to the attention of a lot of people who one, never been on the campus before. And then we're excited to see, wow, they're getting a new building on the Tri-Cities campus. What are you doing in that building? And we talked about our STEM programs. And so and it was just so great to see all of our student volunteers that volunteered for that clinic. In fact, there's a quote, I won't read it on here, from Kelson Record from Rite Aid, who was just blown away by our students. And so, so the other thing, and I know the quality is really bad, but Douglas Fruit partnered with us to provide apples to people after they got vaccinated. And so we're hoping to have another clinic in the next month, and partnering with some of the local food trucks from around the area to maybe come to campus and be available when people are done. So I think we know we have a lot of work to do to try to get the vaccine hesitancy somewhat decreased in our community, but we really do feel that as the four-year university in the Tri-Cities, we've got to really get behind Kirk and get the word out there that this is for public health, right? This is why we're doing this. So Mary Jo, I will hand it back to you.
All right. Ellen, actually going to hand it off to Ellen, our Associate Vice President for the Pullman campus. Ellen?
Thank you, Mary Jo. And let me, I'm going to talk a little bit as the traditional residential campus, talk a little more future forward, talk a little bit about what we're doing this fall and what's happening with our housing and dining area. As you know, this year was particularly hard in this area. We took hits. We had very few students on campus. We are very, very excited that based on effective health protocols, the lack of transmission when we followed those, we are able to house students who want to live on campus in on-campus housing this fall. We have capacity for up to about 4,900 students in our current models. We're constantly evaluating those models and making sure that they're staying in track with all the current health guidelines and so on. And also our dining facilities will remain open and functioning at all capacity guidelines. So regardless of where we land in terms of total numbers, our dining facilities will remain open and functioning as they have really throughout. And I want to do a quick shout out. I think our dining facilities are some of the unsung heroes on the Pullman campus this last year. They have the adaptations that they implemented and their ability to nimbly change on a dime over and over and over again really deserves, I think, a sort of call out, if you will. We are also excited that we can enable students who want roommates to have roommates. We weren't sure about that in the early days as we assessed the models, whether all students would have to live in singles. One of the things that is not a surprise for anyone here is that the last year has been very isolating for our students, as it has been for many in our communities. And so the idea that students can live with a roommate is exciting to us as we think about mental health of our students and just general community building considerations. Students are completing their housing contracts now, and they can indicate if they have a roommate identified. They can mutually identify, and if they do so, we will house them together, or if they would like to be matched by our professionals. We're also looking at the sophomore experience. We know that many of our second year Cougs lived at home or lived alone, and again, felt generally isolated. And so this next year, one of the things we are doing is much more than we ever have before, building out a very intentional engagement, set of engagements for those second year students who really are going to be like transfer students in the way they experience the Pullman campus. So that is something we've been thinking about a lot in the last couple of months, and we'll continue to think about over the next couple of months, working closely with our new student programs and others in sort of expanding our thoughts about who's a new student. I do want to say, even though we're optimistic about what we are looking for this fall, we fully anticipate and hope that the vast majority of our students will be vaccinated. We've been talking about the vaccine hesitancy. It's more significant in Tri-Cities than it may be for most of our students, but we're still paying attention to that. We also know that we don't really know what the fall will bring in terms of the virus. And so we are prepared to house and accommodate on-campus residential students in isolation housing should we need to. We have kept that as part of our repertoire. We will still be using McEachern spaces for that because they're really the best suited for that kind of sort of isolation and support that is needed for a student who may have tested positive. I wanted to also talk a little bit about our other on-campus spaces, our recreation spaces, which have largely stayed open throughout with lots and lots and lots of limitations and restrictions and mitigations in place. Our Cub, et cetera, they're all gearing up for a much more robust return to in-person activities. Many more students, we hope, walking through those halls and getting on that exercise equipment and so on. Again, we're working closely with colleagues in new student programs and across the campus to identify ways to collaborate and make not only the opening of the academic year, but really the entire experience one that will help students see this campus at its best. I can just share with you, walking across campus anytime in the last few months. There was one time I walked all the way from Leidy on the east side of campus to Cougar Health Services on the west side of campus, and I saw 2 humans. And that was on the first really bright sunny day in April, warm sunny day in April. So we are really excited about having that dynamic change in the fall. We are certainly watching enrollment and confirmation trends in our housing very, very closely. Those numbers eventually define our reality for housing and what that's going to look like. And so we're paying close attention to that, and we'll continue to monitor and adjust our models as needed, as well as monitoring, of course, the health guidelines and so on, anything else that might affect it. So I think with that, I'm going to hand the mic off to my colleague, Mark Beatty from Everett.
Thank you, Ellen, and thank you, Vice President Gonzalez and our regents here for the time to share the back to school, back to life, it seems almost. Jim Moore and I are going to kind of co-present because here in Everett, as well as in Spokane, we have shared university spaces, which add a different level of complexity to the things that we've discussed in terms of testing, in terms of vaccination strategies and policies, in terms of just utilizing facilities. So 4 things come to mind, and I'm going to cover the first 2. One is that when you have shared spaces, as we do with Western Washington University, Eastern Washington University, and UW Bothell, even in our building, and our building sits on the land of Everett Community College. So we've got quite a few partners. Being aware that actions by one impact all is incredibly important. For instance, Everett Community College is going to begin construction on a new building on their property, which is presently where our parking is. And the groundbreaking will take place on August 23rd. So that action has impact on all of us. Their policies for housing, we have our students that utilize their housing and things like that. It's just an awareness. And so we have town halls with our partners. We've got one coming up in a couple of weeks to discuss where we are at Washington State and how things will operate in the building and as far as protocols and entry and egress. That takes a lot of collaboration, just all of those partners coming together to collaborate on things and find where the synergies are, as opposed to fragmenting the practices and policies for all the students that are trying to gain access to education regardless of what institution they're at. I would invite you to click on the link here and check out the Everett University Center to see all of the different folks that we have here. It's quite a nice website. You can take a look at it on your own after the presentation. That's fine. But one aspect of collaboration that I want to point out that really brought some synergy. We recently collaborated, Washington State University Everett collaborated with Everett Community College and the Tulalip tribes to put on a vaccination event for students, faculty, and staff of our constituencies. That event was just a couple of weeks ago. And then the second shot event will be on May 22nd. And we had volunteers from all three entities. The Tulalip tribes, their health center, were actually the ones that were administering vaccinations. The rest of us were volunteering, getting people through. And we vaccinated 548 people in one Saturday afternoon. So that was really fun and an example of collaboration. I'm going to pass it over to my good friend and colleague, Jim Moore, on the Spokane campus to talk about a couple of more key points.
Thank you, Mark. That was a great introduction to everything. And I think one of the key things that we always have to think about, everything Mark talked about, it comes down to communication, proper and appropriate communication. So part of that involves knowing each other's plans, because we have multiple universities on our campus. That includes Eastern Washington University, University of Washington, also PNWU has a presence on our campus. So with all these different universities and plans, we work together to collaborate on what those will look like and how we can implement on our campus. And the core is that every campus, every university has to go through our process. So they also submit their plans to risk management group for review. After it goes through their review and recommendations for updates or changes, it then comes to the campus for another review to make sure it can be on our that it can work on our campus, what they want to do, and then it gets approval from the Vice President of Health Sciences and Chancellor. So communication has just been really important. And I know Daryl is in contact with the campuses, with the other colleges, a lot to make sure there isn't a misunderstanding or there isn't conflict in process or policies. And the key is that we follow all the CDC guidelines, our state higher education guidelines, local health departments guidelines. It really helps when we can point to those things and say, these are the guidelines that are out there and this is how we are implementing them. So I think that's been really helpful. They also have to do, anyone coming on campus also has to do the attestation process. So they are all doing that. Their students, their faculty, their staff. So we do have that happening. The other piece is negotiation, you can say, because we have our contractual obligations or our agreement obligations with some of them. And what that really comes down to is space. The space that they may have traditionally been in, they may not be able to be in because it no longer has the appropriate physical distancing guidelines. So we have to put them in different spaces, and we're working really hard to make sure all the classes can be on campus that need to be on campus and still meet the appropriate physical distancing guidelines. And so that's just talking with them. We're also planning multiple plans. We're creating multiple plans so that we can change and adjust as needed. So we're setting up what would it look like if we have 3 foot distancing, what will it look like if we have 6 foot distancing, what happens if something really goes wrong and things are virtual again, right? So we're just trying to be ready. So we're not just reactive, but we've been proactive in creating those plans. And that includes our other partners who are on campus. And there's also a link there on Your Time. If you want to go check it out, it's a new site, I guess, new page that was put together by our admissions and recruitment office in collaboration with the communications office. And it really reflects really well on our campus and what we're doing. And it shows the, it's for potential students. So we're pretty excited about it. And also our students, like the other ones, have been very involved with vaccine clinics all over the Yakima and Spokane communities. We have them, and not just vaccinations, they've been involved with the testing. So they've gotten really involved and connected. So it's been really exciting to be able to have our students get out there and be part of the solution and part of the community. So thank you.
Mary Jo did have to leave, so, and I think Kim is having technical difficulties, so I'm gonna queue up Debbie to speak about Global Campus, I believe.
Thank you, Ellen, and good morning, everybody. Wanted to take just a few minutes to talk about some of the realities for Global Campus students. Of course, they're not going to be coming back to a physical campus, but they have, as adult learners, they have plenty of concerns, including issues like access to vaccines, a lot of concerns about the work world. A lot of our students have been impacted by the pandemic, have lost jobs or have lost hours. So there's just so many of those concerns. A lot of our students are parents, and so there's that ongoing concern and uncertainty about what's happening with schools come this fall, and then also childcare issues as well. And then I know our student government is really looking forward to being able to host some face-to-face events come fall and throughout the upcoming academic year. But there's so much uncertainty around that as well, as far as what those requirements will look like. So really for Global Campus students, they're sort of a reflection of the adult community at large and the uncertainties that so many Americans and really worldwide people are facing as far as the impacts of COVID and what the future brings.
Okay, I do believe we are through all of our slides, and so I think we really have time, Regent Sims, to hand it to you for any questions or discussion you and Regent Kanan and Ramos have for us. And so I think we're all ready to answer any questions you have. Oops, Regent Sims, you're on mute.
Thank you. Are there any questions before I begin to ask my own? Any questions?
Regent Sims, hi. Can I just compliment the whole team and thank everybody? And Ellen, I love your art behind you. That is really cool. So my question is really related to how you all collaborate, because, we come to this space and we only see, sort of these outcomes. And I'm curious about your process for reaching out to, learn best practices in the academic community, or even amongst yourselves. I'm curious about how often you share ideas or best practices to come up with your local community agendas.
That is a great question, and I'm looking around at my colleagues to see. I could hop in and give an initial take on it, but I'm sure others have. I'll say a couple of things and then I'll open it up. I know others have things to contribute as well. One thing I'll say about this group is that we are in regular communication with each other, both formally and informally. We have a student affairs sort of cabinet meetings, regular meetings, and each of us is in the room together where we can discuss what's happening on each of our campuses, what's happening across the system. How are we both ensuring consistency and also recognizing the unique implementations and operationalizations of various policies and protocols and things that we need to attend to for each campus, since each campus does have its uniqueness and is embedded in unique communities. So that is one thing I will say is I'm on emails with some of these folks almost daily. I get something from probably someone in this group, and I'm sure that there are other emails flying back and forth or Teams chats flying back and forth that I'm not aware of. So there's that. And I don't know if others will have other things they want to add.
I just wanted to add our professional networks that we're all a part of. And for example, with Ellen, with a lot of health providers and connections and opportunities that we don't necessarily have, having folks from academic affairs that also are engaged in student affairs and really the communication between academic affairs and student affairs and faculty, because they impact our students and what it is that we do. And so it's helpful just to have that perspective and to address some of those issues before it plays out in a way that impacts our students negatively. that we can kind of address things and communicate things in a way that is productive. But going back to what Ellen said, just having us get together, even if it's once every other week, to just say, okay, what's happening here, what swirl is happening, and what are some of the resources and information we can share, and then figure out what's not being communicated in certain areas, and then address that.
Yeah, on that note, did you all have a preview to the policy for vaccinations prior to on campus? Is that communication coming to you in advance, and are you well prepared for addressing, community reaction and question? And, we have such a broad spectrum of reactions on all fronts, right? So whether it's vaccine hesitancy or masking, whatever, is I'm just looking for your feedback or insight on that. Which, by the way, just to celebrate a moment, because I do think it's wonderful that WSU took a leadership role in the state of Washington. So congratulations to everyone here.
Thank you for that. I'm going to reiterate something Mary Jo said very early in this meeting today, which is that shout out to Haley Rupp, who has been our sort of all things COVID coordinator for the whole WSU system. She's been working very hard behind the scenes. And when there is something that is as significant as the vaccine requirement, I think she does everything she can to make sure all of us and all of our teams on each of our campuses is apprised in advance. We get sort of we think this is coming. This is when we think it's going to be announced publicly. Then yes, it's really going to come. And accompanying that for this one, there were some FAQs, particularly for those who answer phones, those who are on those front lines who are likely to get the calls with questions and concerns and reactions. Everyone from the front desk folks in the president's office who certainly field their fair share, the folks who answer the phones with our communications team and so on, as well as throughout student affairs, because student affairs offices is another set of group. When there's an announcement like this, the calls go to the president's office, the communications office, and all of the student affairs offices. That's where people call to express their concerns, their reactions, their joy in this instance. We certainly got some very positive reactions, which we were all pleased about, and also lots and lots of questions. So I think that's something we have done particularly well these last several months. We've just got it down to almost a science in terms of how do we make sure we are all updated with things that are about to come out that may have an impact and that we may have to be able to respond to, and we want to respond to consistently.
Ellen, I would just add to that I really appreciated that we were also given an email template that we could use to respond to requests. I know for me, I was getting questions from staff in our Gear Up program who work in school districts. They're not on campus, but having those FAQs and an email template to be able to respond was really helpful.
Thank you.
Are there more questions?
I don't have a question per se, but I just wanted to applaud you guys in terms of the education that you guys are trying to give out to people to address, I guess, the hesitancy for vaccines and masking. Because right now with the age of the internet, I think there's a lot of misinformation. So I think it's really good that you guys are pushing that out because people do have their own concerns and they read things online. So I think if we can continue to, I guess, educate people, I think that'd be really good moving forward. And then being, I guess, how we are with the vaccine requirement, being at the forefront of that. I think you guys are doing a great job. So just a comment, not a question.
Can I add a happy anecdote to that comment? Good morning, everyone. Anna Plemons, WSU Tri-Cities. I recently learned this week that we have a student who is in a paid internship with the Hispanic Chamber of Commerce here in town. And that student has been tasked with creating videos that the Chamber's putting together with regional experts who are Latinx, speaking to the Latinx community, trying to increase vaccine adoption. And that student was really excited to have that assignment. It was exciting to me as an intersection between classroom and community and providing students opportunities to do work that's really meaningful to them. So just a little extra.
Additional comments? I want to say this, WSU is in a league of its own at the moment. Oops.
Regent Sims, I'm sorry to interrupt. I'm having a hard time hearing you, and I don't know if others are.
Can you hear me now?
Just.
Let me see. I don't know if I can get this up. Can you hear me now?
I-
Is that better?
Just a little. You're distant. Oh,
Oh, that was a lot louder.
I don't know. I will.
It's still really, really hard to hear you. I'm so sorry. Technical difficulties.
I've got our tech support person coming in to see if she can help.
Thank you.
Awesome.
I think it's a pairing issue with his buds.
Oh, yeah,
Need
that
to
could be.
pair it.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Much better.
Very
Thank
cool.
you.
I'm not the house techie, so all kinds of strange things happen. I wanted to applaud all of the incredible work being done by Washington State University. It's in a league of its own, and in this state, it says a lot in regards to what other universities doing, what other groups are doing. I think there's some things that we should be alert to. One is likely ever since the studies of viruses in this state, which started in 1918 at the behest of a large number of women, actually, who were the early pioneers of creating the need for research and the knowledge of vaccinations. It's mutating again. And the big debate with the federal government is, are the vaccines we've taken up to now going to be sufficient? Pfizer has subtly said they will likely have a third vaccine available. They would not be working on that if the science didn't tell them that we're going to need a third vaccination. So it doesn't mean that we should be nervous. I think it is an issue of educating students by saying that viruses just don't stay. They develop a personality of their own as a life form, and we'll be at risk again. So I think it's going to be important that when that happens, if it happens, I think it's going to happen, and I think a number of people in the field believe it's going to happen, that we are really well prepared to explain to students that the first two vaccines are absolutely a requirement. And that we're now dealing with the residual behavior of viruses that alter their life forms and will attempt to continue to infect. So I think that whoever does that well is going to be of note. And I can't think of anybody right now who's in Washington State University's class. I just saw the protocols done by the University of Washington and said, I cannot believe with a medical school as large as they are, all the medicine research they're doing, that they came out with a policy that the Washington State University would not even consider it because it didn't do very much. So I think that Washington State University should remain in the lead, and we should be prepared for what happens when this virus mutates again. And the importance of being able to explain to students that this isn't the first time that there was a third vaccination requirement for a contagious disease, illness. And we should be prepared for that. I would like not to see that happen, but the data is screaming out loud at the moment. And I think why I want that is that it will be beneficial to Washington State University to continue to lead because it attracts federal funds and private sector foundation funds who are looking for an exemplary institution to fund who is handling something as dramatic as this virus and this pandemic really, really well. And I think that it's called bragging rights. And I know it's an odd phrase to use in the middle of a pandemic, but it gives you a status of being able to lead and change policies in the state, in the region, and it'll have a marked impact on what the federal government ultimately does. So I just hope that we continue to run really, really fast. The staff work on this is amazing. It really is amazing. And what Washington University has done up to now is extraordinary. We're in a class by yourself. And nobody has been left out. Everybody's been integrated into the effort, which is really, really important, because that's what I think students are entitled to have, and faculty are entitled to have, and the employees who work for us are entitled to have that kind of excellence. So I just sitting here just smiling. You have no idea how big a smile I am at saying, wow, you know, those of us who studied the 1918 pandemic, and Dr. David Fleming, who now is the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation's medical director, and Dr. Howard Frumkin, he was at the CDC, went to the NIH, and is now in Europe handling Europe's policies from Switzerland. They would never have thought that anyone could take the whole piece of a pandemic and handle it as well as Washington State University. And that says a lot, because they are at the top of the class internationally and locally, and in their fields of public health and of medicine. So I'm just, I don't know if the word tickled pink makes any sense to you. It's an old phrase I use. My mother used to say, you know, my mom and dad used to say tickled pink, and I don't know what else to use, but I've been sitting here just smiling and smiling and smiling at what we have done, the institutions that have created the capacity to do, the buy-in that we have done. We could not have asked for anything more than we have already received. But I'd rather say, when you're the leader, you run faster, you never, ever run slower. And I think we're leading the pack. And I want the other universities. I saw UW's response in the newspaper, which was widely mocked by anybody who knew, even in the newspaper, for its lack of effort. But I'm not, or it's not an issue with whether UW does it right, or whether University of Montana does it right, or UCLA, or USC, or University of Texas, University of Maryland. We did better than Harvard. We did better than Yale. I just want to applaud the incredible effort and all of the people, all of the students, faculty, and staff that are making going to Washington State University a great experience and a safe one as well. I just needed to say that.
Well, you know, thank you, Regent Sims. And my mother used to say tickled pink as well. So I love hearing that phrase. She was a Southerner. I don't know if that's the root or not. But one of the things that your comments made me think, and I will pass this along, you know, Dr. Guy Palmer, who is on our faculty and has really been such a critical component of WSU's response. And he's done a fair amount of work, created videos educating folks about the vaccines themselves. Your comments gave me the idea, which I will pass along to the committee that's working on sort of how do we get the science out there. It'd be great for him to do a series of videos that are about viruses themselves, because I think you make the good point, which is that students and others need to not just understand vaccines and how the development of vaccines happens and why they're safe and how they impact the spread of the virus. They need to understand viruses. Your comments about viruses being these little, I sort of think of them as little creatures that have personalities, just as you said. I've called this one a very sneaky virus because it has been very sneaky. It has capitalized on our human tendencies our human need to socialize. It has really capitalized on some of the particular components, I think, of Western culture, to be honest, and for better or worse, well, mostly for worse, unfortunately. But so I will pass that along, because I think that might be a real opportunity for us to, again, lead with some education around sort of what is a virus and how does it work and what does it mean when we say that variants are developing and it's mutating. How does that fit into understanding just sort of life forms? Because it's a little life form that has certainly affected our life forms. So thank you for those. And thank you for the pats on the back. I think there's not anyone in this room who doesn't appreciate hearing that from you, because it's been a tough 16 months or so.
Thank
Are
you.
there other questions or other comments?
I'd like to just point out that the reason why we do all of this is for the students. And I know that each of our campuses are having some sort of commencement event. We've got the virtual one system-wide for on Saturday morning, but we're having a drive-through event. I know Pullman hosted a drive-through event, and other campuses are doing events around that. And it's just marvelous to see our students that are graduating in the midst of this. I've been writing recommendation letters for either graduate school or jobs, so many this spring. And it's like, I get down so far to it and I just want to put in a sentence. This student graduated in the middle of a pandemic. Drop the mic. I should not have to write anything else in terms of recommendation. And I don't know what your schedule is for the Board of Regents, but tonight is going to be the top 10 senior awards by the Alumni Association at 6 o'clock. So if you have an opportunity and you're tired from the day, but really, really need some inspiration before you head off to bed, 6 o'clock, I encourage you to dial into that, see some wonderful students and wonderful stories. So thank you for the opportunity to serve our students in the state.
One additional comment that Mark made me think about was really thinking about this year's and last year's students of graduating during a remote instruction. I mean, even without the pandemic and that. And I think so many students are disheartened by the end of their college career being through remote instruction. And my comment to many of them and their families this year has been, this is preparing you for a world in which at least a third of the jobs will have a portion of work in some sort of way or capacity, so that as you agents go out and meet with families and colleagues, just encouraging those students that are entering the workforce that they honed a skill during this period that will be a part of all of our lives, at least many of them, for the foreseeable future, so that this wasn't all lost. This was an opportunity to hone their skill in a place where people cared for them, where they got to make some mistakes and get better, as we all do during our college experience. And so this is just a unique piece that they will get to carry with them and will make them stronger in the workplace. So I try to really take what the students that are graduating this week have been through and really turn it to a point of strength and really encourage them as they go into the next steps and stages of their lives, that this is a skill that they will always have with them.
Well said. Very well said. Are there any other comments? Any other comments? It was a great meeting. I'm continue to remain in awe of what Washington State University does. They make it look easy, and it is not easy. Washington State University is in a class of its own, and we should be very proud of that fact, because that is a fact. Seeing no other questions, other hands, anybody else wanting to speak? Our meeting is adjourned, and it was one heck of a good meeting, and I'm a happy, 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 happy camper. Just cannot tell you how happy you made me. Peace and prosperity, and please be well. Thank you.
Thank you, and goodbye, everybody.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.